So I'm going to listen along.
Okay. Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Who has no sound? You have no sound. David, you have no sound.
Where's David?
So there's two things I want to do with us tonight. We're coming up to Rosh Hashanah. We have 3 Thursday nights. We have 2 weeks left, so that's tonight, next week, and the week after. So we'll see what we can get in for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Sukkot and see how that goes. We've got 5 Thursday nights for the whole month of Tishrei. Thursday night, then Thursday night before Yom Kippur, and then Thursday night before Sukkot, and then Thursday night of Sukkot. So we have 6. Very nice. The upcoming year is a very unique year in the Jewish calendar. It is a year that's only happened, this is only the 4th time that this year, as we'll soon see, has happened in the last 81 years. Okay, what do we mean? So in the Jewish calendar, the way, we're not going to be doing the Jewish calendar tonight, but Hillel is the one who arranged the Jewish calendar in the most ingenious way with 19-year cycles. And that way we always keep Pesach in the spring, etc., various other things. David Bennett, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can. I'm on my phone. I can find.
Good. Welcome. Okay.
Thank you.
And various things which he put into the calendar, which are amazing how he did that without a computer. Yom Kippur can never fall on a Friday or a Sunday because you can't come into Shabbos fasting or go from Shabbos into a fast. Rosh Hashanah never falls out on Sunday, Tuesday, and Friday. Hashanah Rabbah can never be on a Shabbos, and various other things which he installed into his calendar. So each one different. There are different types of years, and there's different amount of days, as we'll soon see. So each one has a different letter, 3-letter arrangement to describe the year. And this year, the 3-letter arrangement is Zayin, Ches, and Aleph. What does that mean? So Zayin tells us that Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos. We haven't had Rosh Hashanah falling on Shabbos since the year 2009. So it's been 11 years since we had Rosh Hashanah falling on Shabbos. Ches.
Okay.
Okay.
Turning it off.
That's fine.
Turning my phone off. I'm back. I'm fine now.
Good. Ches tells us that the year is a chasera. Chaser means missing. What does it mean? Hillel composed the calendar. He arranged a calendar that every month is either 29 or 30 days, because the lunar, the time for every moon. Good evening, Stan. Stan, you can hear me?
I can hear you perfectly well.
Good. Good evening. So the lunar calendar is 29 days, 12 hours, 793 parts. You can't have a new month starting every 29 and a half days. So therefore, what he did was, some months will have 29 days, some months will have 30 days, and some months we have 2 days Rosh Chodesh, some months 1 day Rosh Chodesh. But there's 2 months that change, and that is the month of Cheshvan and the month of Kislev. Sometimes they have 29, and sometimes they have 30. Sometimes one of them has 29 and the other 30. Sometimes both have 29, sometimes both have 30. Okay? So when they both have 30, it's called a full year. It's got the full 355 days on the Jewish calendar. 12 moons is 355 days. When one is full and one isn't, then you have 354 days. Zayin, Ches, Aleph, which is this year, Ches is Chaser. This year is missing. It means we both, Cheshvan and Kislev, are 29 days. So this year's number is 353 days to the calendar, to this year's calendar. Okay, so the Jewish year, this coming year, will be, the year 5781 will be 353 days. Now this is relevant for something called Keren Hashanah. Keren Hashanah is a fund that the Rebbe instituted in the early 1950s to help people to be able to give tzedakah every single day. So he said, if you give money into this fund, the amount of the days of the year, so 353 this year, pennies, 5-cent coins, 10p coins, 20p coins, however much a person wants, 353 pounds, whatever it is. And from that fund, tzedakah will go out every single day of the year, and they'll even do it for you on Shabbos. In other words, Friday, double for Shabbos. And that way, if you forgot to give tzedakah one day, you haven't because someone has given tzedakah from your money, and therefore you've given tzedakah every day, and it's very important for a Jew to give charity every single day. So for that fund, it's important to know the amount of days of the year, which is 353 days. I'm not aware of anything else that it's really relevant to our lives to know how many days, but it's good to know. So that's Zayin and Ches. And then Aleph that tells us the day of the week when Rosh Chodesh Nisan will fall out. And that's going to be Aleph on a Sunday. Because when you know when Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls out, you know when Pesach falls out. And as the Shulchan Aruch says, when you know when Pesach falls out, you're able to then figure out all the other Yom Tovim. With the Atbash system. You know what's the Atbash system, anybody? You ever heard of it? Atbash is Aleph, Tov, Beis, Shin. If you take the first and last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and then the second to the last, and the third letter, and the third to the last, good evening, Robert, and the fourth letter, and the fourth to the last, and so on. So you have Atbash, that's what it's called. Aleph, Tov, Beis, Shin, Gimel, Reish, Daled, Kuf, yeah? If you know when Pesach is, so let's say this year we're saying that Rosh Chodesh Nisan is Aleph. So Pesach is Aleph, Pesach is on Sunday. So if Aleph is Tov. Tov is Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av will also be on Sunday. Beis is Shin. That's Shavuos. Beis of Pesach is on Monday. So Shavuos will be on Monday. Gimel, the third day of Pesach, is on Tuesday. That's Reish. That's when next year Rosh Hashanah will be, on a Tuesday. Right? When was Pesach this past year? Anybody remember? We just had Pesach. Remember that far back?
The Shabbos,
Huh?
Friday, Shabbos, wasn't it?
wasn't it Shabbos and Sunday?
No. It was Thursday, Friday, and Shabbos. First Seder was Wednesday night. So the third day of Pesach was Shabbos. And Gimel is Reish, which is this Rosh Hashanah, which is also going to be Shabbos. Right? So you have Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled. Daled is Kuf, which is Kriya, the day when we finish reading the whole Torah, which is Simchas Torah. It's going to be the same day of the week that the fourth day of Pesach was, which was Sunday. So Simchas Torah will be Sunday. Hey is what's before Kuf? Tzadik, Tzom, the day of the fast, which is Yom Kippur. It's going to be on Monday. Vav is Pei, which is when Purim was. Why is it important to know when Purim was? So you know when Lag Boimer will be. This is all in the Shulchan Aruch. And then finally, Zayin. No, that's it. It goes up to Vav. Shulchan Aruch says it goes up to Vav. Right? So that's just interesting things, how it goes according to the Aleph base, how the calendar works. So therefore, this year's calendar, this year's Zayin Ches Aleph, it happened in 5761, which was 2001. That means from September 2000 to September 2001. It happened before that in 1977. And before that, in 1950. And this is only the fourth time since 1950, in the last 81 years. So it's quite a rare setup of the calendar for this year. In addition to that, which adds to this rarity of these four times, is not just Zayin Ches Aleph. Zayin, we've had Shabbos, Rosh Hashanah before, but it's also this year the 10th of Tevis falls on a Friday. That means we come into Shabbos fasting. We break our fast on Kiddush. Do you remember when the last time that happened? That was also a long time ago. Purim this year will be on a Friday. That means that in Jerusalem, when Purim is on our Shushan Purim, what do? Because Purim is Friday, so their Purim is going to be on Shabbos. You can't have Purim on Shabbos. So they have over there in Jerusalem what's called the Purim HaMeshulash, a triple Purim, 3 days, Friday, Shabbos, and Sunday. They read the Megillah on the Friday. They have the big Suda on the Sunday, and the Suda is on Shabbos, and the Shalach Manos is on Sunday. Purim HaMeshulash, also a rare thing, which means that Pesach is Motzei Shabbos. The first Seder will be right after Shabbos. The Erev Pesach is on Shabbos, which has ramifications for Friday, because normally you have to finish eating chametz and then burn it. Here, we burn it on Friday, and we finish eating on Shabbos. Okay, we'll deal with that in 6 months' time. Another interesting rarity of this year is that this year, for the first time in many years, we're going to read the Haftarah of Shabbos Parshas Miketz. Does anybody know why normally we do not read, most years, we do not read the Haftarah of Miketz? Does anybody know why?
Because it's Shabbos Chanukah.
because it's always Shabbos Chanukah. Correct. This year, it's not Shabbos Chanukah. Vayeshev is Shabbos Chanukah, and Miketz is after Chanukah. And what's the haftarah of Miketz? A very rare haftarah. The story of Miketz, of that haftarah, is rarely read. You're all familiar with the story. You know what the haftarah is? No, Jeff, you don't got that one. The story of King Solomon with the baby, cutting the baby in half.
Yeah.
That's the haftarah of Miketz, and this year it will be read for the first time in many years. So that's just nothing to do with what we're going to be learning tonight, but it's a piece of information that's good to know, which I had to stick it in one of these 3 weeks, so we might as well get it done tonight. So it's good for if you're going to have a game of Trivia Pursuit over Shabbos, you got some nice facts and make you sound intelligent and like you know your stuff. If you can remember all that, I can send you the notes of those items that I just said. Okay. Now I want to move on to the subject that we want to learn tonight. We mentioned that Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos. Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos, that means Sukkot will also fall on Shabbos. And Shmini Atzeres will fall on Shabbos. All the Yom Tovim this year are Shabbos and Sunday in the month of Tishrei, which of course is very convenient for anybody who goes to work. It's all weekends other than Yom Kippur, which is on Monday. It works out very nice. It's on a weekend. But it has a halachic ramification in that we don't blow the shofar on Shabbos, on Rosh Hashanah that falls on Shabbos. So this year we're only going to be blowing the shofar on the Sunday, which actually works out very well because many people this year, unfortunately, are not going to be going to shul. And we've arranged a Megillah reading for all of the Jewish community in Liverpool that no one will have to walk more than 10 minutes from their house, and you'll be able to have a shofar blowing with a schedule, where it's going to be in different houses. So that will be circulated next week, and everyone will be able to hear the shofar. So it's only one day, so it's easy to get around for everyone. So it'll be between me and Shmuley Brown and Rabbi Fegelman and Rabbi Citron. It will be all over South Liverpool, and the goal is that no one should have to walk more than 10 minutes. Anyway, that will be next week's publicity from us. Why don't we blow the shofar if it falls on Shabbos?
Because we don't hear music on. We don't play music for Shabbos.
That's an interesting answer. I never thought of that one.
The risk of carrying the shofar.
Oh, that's also a good answer. The risk of carrying the shofar, and you're not allowed to carry on Shabbos. Okay, just as an aside, Stan, good answer. But why don't we play music on Shabbos?
Because they used to play music in the services in the temple when the temple stood.
Oh.
But as we don't have a temple, we remember many of the things that we can't do because of the fall of the temple.
Okay, another good answer. Did you guess that, or did you read that somewhere?
I worked it out for myself.
Okay,
and I think you said so once. But anyway.
Okay, that's a big Bobby Meiser.
It is it?
We don't play music on Shabbos, not to commemorate the temple. We don't play music on Shabbos. It's a rabbinic fence. We always talk about the rabbinic laws that are there, a fence to protect us from transgressing the biblical command, the biblical prohibition of fixing, repairing.
I thought it was because the Reform do.
We have a prohibition of repairing things on Shabbos. And therefore, if one is playing a musical instrument, one may be then tempted to repair it. For example, the string instruments in particular, we need to set the strings and so on. So the Chazal, they prohibited playing music on Shabbos. So that is why we're not allowed to play music, but a shofar is biblical command. The sages can't override a biblical command. You understand? So that's not the reason. The reason is, as Ashley said, because someone may carry it on Shabbos, and carrying is a biblical prohibition. And that's what we're going to be learning here tonight. An interesting discussion. I'm going to share the screen so we can all have the same text instead of me reading.
If you're in an Eruv, surely you could carry a shofar.
Within an Eruv, yes, that's true. Let me just say, but we may have to show video panel. Here we go. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Yes, David, you within an Eruv, but not everyone lives within an Eruv, so they couldn't make certain rules for this and certain rules for that. So it became, as we'll soon see, the shofar was only blown in the Beis Hamikdash itself. So this prohibition of blowing shofar on Shabbos goes back even to temple times.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so let's read this together. The pinnacle of the day of Rosh Hashanah is when the shofar is blown. Yet the Talmud states that when Rosh Hashanah coincides with Shabbos, like this year, we don't blow the shofar. So the question which we need to examine is, what's the reason for the cancellation of this special mitzvah? So the Talmud provides the following explanation. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says, "Hakel chayavim b'tkiyas shofar." Everyone is obligated to the mitzvah of tkiyas shofar, of blowing the shofar. Now, interesting, the mitzvah is to blow or to hear the shofar. In fact, the bracha that said before blowing the shofar isn't litkoa, to blow the shofar. The bracha is lishmoa kol shofar, to hear the sound of the shofar. And that's very significant because somebody who's deaf, can he blow the shofar for others if he can't even hear it himself? And the answer is no, because if he cannot fulfill the mitzvah himself, he can't fulfill the mitzvah for others, as it is with many other things. If you can't do the mitzvah yourself, you can't be yotze others. So the mitzvah is a tkiyas shofar, but the mitzvah is to hear the shofar. But ve'ein hakel b'kiyin b'tkiyas, yet not all are familiar with the laws and procedures for the tkiyas shofar, for the blowing. So the sages decreed that nobody blow the shofar on this day, due to fear that an unlearned individual will bring the shofar to an expert to ask a shaila, to inquire about the laws. Right? A classic shaila, he has a problem. A shofar can have many problems. There can be cracks, there could be holes, and there's very intricate, detailed halachas about the shofar. If the crack is in the length, if the crack is in the circumference, if it's at the top, if it's at the bottom. Many laws. So someone will have a shaila in his shofar. Don't forget, they didn't have shuls in those days. So people didn't go to shul to blow their shofar. They had a shofar at home. They had animals. They went and made a shofar. It wasn't an exotic instrument as it might be today. So we're concerned that an unlearned individual will bring the shofar to an expert to inquire about the laws. In doing so, he will transgress the prohibition of carrying an object more than 4 cubits in a public area on Shabbos. That is the problem. And for that reason, the Gemara records the sages decreed that nobody blows the shofar on this day. And then the Gemara concludes, the same reasoning applies to the omission of reading the Megillah when Purim falls out on Shabbos. This is before the days of Hillel, when he made engineered the calendar that Purim can never fall on Shabbos. But back then, before Hillel made the calendar, people our whole calendar was with witnesses who saw the new moon. So the same thing then, they said you can't read the Megillah when Purim falls on Shabbos, and the omission of shaking the lulav when Sukkot falls out on Shabbos as well. They did not make this prohibition regarding Pesach falling on Shabbos, about eating matzah. And that perhaps we'll discuss at the end. That they didn't extend this decree to eating to matzah. Now matzah really should be the same problem. Okay, today you have Rakuzin's matzah at 69 or 79p a box. It's not a big deal. Back in the day, matzah wasn't so easy, and you can have a shaila in Shulchan Aruch. There's a whole chapter dealing in detail of the kashrus of a matzah. If a matzah has bubbles, today you have machines that make the holes in it so it doesn't bubble up. But if a matzah there's an afucha, there's a kfula. If a matzah doubled over, so we're concerned that the dough that's inside the fold didn't bake properly. And afucha means like you have pizza, you got a bubble, right? So the problem with the dough inside the bubble. So there's all sorts of shilas that can be with a matzah. So why aren't they concerned that somebody will take his matzah Seder night on Friday night and go to the rabbi to ask a shaila about the matzah? We'll get to that at the end. But the decree was only about shofar, lulav, and Megillah. So here comes the big question. Okay, this is a question that's asked in Chabad Hasidus by each one of the Chabad rabbis. Asked the same question, and they answer it on the same line with a different insight. The Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, he raises the following question. We know that Torah is eternal, and its laws are everlasting. Right? God is timeless, His wisdom is timeless, and therefore His Torah is timeless. Which means that it applies in all generations, in all times, in all circumstances. But nonetheless, the rabbis are concerned that there might be one unfortunate shlemiel. What's the difference between a shlemiel and a shlemazel? I don't know. You do know. They say the shlemiel is the one that spills the soup, the shlemazel is the one whom the soup falls on. And the nudnik is the one who asks if it was hot or cold. So here, apparently, it's a shlemiel. We're concerned that there might be one unfortunate shlemiel. It won't be a shul for the shofar blowing. He'll have his own shofar at home, but he doesn't know how he's supposed to blow it on Rosh Hashanah, so he'll bring it to the rabbi's house for a tutorial. Or he may have a shaila, as I said earlier, forgetting that it's forbidden to carry an object in the public domain on Shabbos.
Could I ask a question, Rami?
Yes.
I've been reading about the laws of the Erev in the Mishnah Torah, and it's very, very specific about how you can carry in this and that, in great detail about the boundaries and the structure of the boundary. Why have they chosen a shofar to be excluded when they allow everything else within an Erev?
The shofar is also allowed with it, as I said to you before. The problem is that not everyone lives within an Erev.
Oh, so it is allowed if you're in an Erev.
So therefore, they didn't make a rule that shofar is forbidden unless you live in an Erev. They stopped shofar completely for everyone, across the board. Otherwise, you can have some Jews who blow and some who don't. So they stopped it for everyone, whether you have an Erev or not.
They stopped it even if you live in an Erev.
Even if you live in an Erev.
So why choose a shofar? Why have they allowed everything else within the Erev?
What other mitzvah did they allow within the Erev? The three mitzvahs that we have a problem that a person may go to ask a question, they stopped. The Megillah, the Lulav, and the Shofar. What else would a person accidentally carry outside of the Erev, or be tempted to carry outside of the Erev?
Well, there was a lot about a corpse and what have you, and all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things mentioned.
Yeah, but you're not going to carry it outside of the Erev on Shabbos because you're not going to bury the corpse on Shabbos, so it's not going to be a problem that you may by mistake carry it. While the Lulav, or the Megillah, or the Shofar, you'll have a Shaila. So you're going to go and ask, and you may forget. It's important. It's only today you can do it. So, okay. So, this is the beginning of the Alter Rebbe's question. Torah we know is eternal, but nonetheless, we're concerned about this situation of somebody who has a shaila and will forget that it's Shabbos and carry it in the public domain. For that, we cancel such an important mitzvah as blowing the shofar. The early sages of the Talmud were so concerned about this hypothetical case that they said, you know what, when Rosh Hashanah coincides with Shabbos, let's suspend the mitzvah of shofar altogether. So hold on a second, is that not a little extreme? Because of this obscure case, it's not something that's very common. When was the last time I had this year for the first time, somebody sent me a picture of a shofar asking me a shaila. He has a shofar. I've never had the shaila before on a shofar. It's not so common. So because of this obscure case, the entire Jewish nation loses out on the mitzvah of shofar. No one is going to hear shofar. And don't forget, and no one's going to hear shofar. In any case, how could the sages go ahead like that? And second question, how can the sages come along and uproot a mitzvah that's a biblical deraisa because of a concern of the Rabbanon? Can the rabbis come and uproot a biblical command? That's even a bigger question. Where do they get the authority to cancel a biblical mitzvah? So this is the question that the Alter Rebbe asks, and the question was raised by various other successors of his, or the other Rebbeim. And it's the question which the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Rebbe, Rebbe Shalom Dov Ber, initiated his fundamental Hemshech Samach Vav 1906. He started an essay teaching it every Shabbos, starting from Rosh Hashanah of 1905, and it went on until about 1908. Every week it continued. It's a long, deep, mystical exposition, but it begins with this question of Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah that falls on Shabbos. And this is the answer that they all give. And that is, we must first understand that every mitzvah carries a unique divine energy. No two mitzvahs are the same. So we have to look at mitzvahs. We know that mitzvahs are, one thing we know mitzvahs are not. Mitzvahs are not good deeds. That's a common mistake. Mitzvah means a command. It's a command of Hashem. Something that Hashem wants. Some of them we can relate to and understand why he wants it. And some of his wants we don't understand. But we do them because that's what he wants. Another meaning of a mitzvah is, the Zohar says, a mitzvah is a tzafso, it's a bond, it's a connection, it's a link. It's a way of connecting to God. How is it possible to connect to an infinite, spiritual, invisible God? You're right, it's not possible. It's only possible because he created ways that we can connect to him. So he said the tefillin have to be black and square and corners and leather. He didn't say that you can use round, purple, or triangle boxes. He said specifically this. Why? That's a good question. But we do it because that's what he wants, because that's what connects us with him. And every mitzvah achieves a different type of connection with Hashem. Every mitzvah has a unique divine energy. So when you do a mitzvah, you're bringing that energy into this world, affecting your own life and your surroundings. That's what happens when we do a mitzvah. The more people are aware of the power of a mitzvah, the more people will be interested in performing mitzvahs. As we say so many times, the lack of education, the ignorance, people don't understand, don't appreciate what a mitzvah is. If we realize that each mitzvah is a link, is a connection to Hashem, and each mitzvah affects our lives and our surroundings, then it's much more exciting to do a mitzvah. In the Messianic era, the wool will be lifted from our eyes, and we'll finally sense this energy, and we'll see the fruits of our efforts, of the mitzvahs that we are performing now. We don't see it now, but the achievement we will see. So each mitzvah is unique in the different energy that it brings down to us and to this world. In particular, the mitzvah of Shofar carries a tremendous energy. Why? Because this is the first mitzvah of the unique mitzvah of the year, and therefore it affects the entire year to come. So the mitzvah of Shofar is a very special one. So what happens when Rosh Hashanah comes along? And it's the time that we would usually blow the Shofar, but it's Shabbos. So what happens to the divine energy that the world needs for the next year? We're not going to get it because this Shabbos. So he's asking the question even greater now. It's not just, as we asked before, a legal question of how can the sages cancel a biblical mitzvah because of a concern of a concern that rarely happens. Here's a question on a deeper level. Since the mitzvah of Shofar is so fundamental and important for the new energy for the upcoming year, how will the year be without blowing Shofar? So let's read it in his words. He says, all that is drawn down to the world through the blowing of the Shofar is accomplished through Shabbos automatically. Simple line. You don't need to blow Shofar when Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos, because those spiritual things that happen and those spiritual radiations and energies that come down as a result of Shofar blowing is achieved through the holiness of the day of Shabbos together with Rosh Hashanah. Not just any Shabbos, it's a Shabbos that's Rosh Hashanah as well. And that does the job for us. That's what he's, in short. I mean, he explains it over many, many pages. But that's in short what he says. With its magnitude of holiness, not only does Shabbos bring its own unique energy to the world like it does every week, it also fills in for the lack of the shofar too. It's no longer necessary to blow the shofar because its influx of divine energy is already present. So by observing Shabbos when it coincides with Rosh Hashanah and not blowing the shofar, we accomplish exactly what the shofar would have achieved in any other year, when Rosh Hashanah occurs on a weekday. Therefore, the sages deemed it appropriate to suspend the mitzvah of shofar due to the concern of a possible transgression of carrying on Shabbos, because you don't need the shofar anyway. And transgressing Shabbos is no good. So they said, you know what, we won't have shofar, because Shabbos is going to achieve what normally shofar is able to achieve. That's how great and holy Shabbos is. Okay? That is what he says over there in Samach Vov in the 1905 discourse. The Rebbe takes a deeper look and he asks a question. He says, let's go back to the Alter Rebbe's question. The question was, how could the sages revoke a Torah commandment? So we answered the whole business. It's a mystical thing. There's the certain holiness and radiation that mitzvahs achieve. Each mitzvah achieves unique, and the mitzvah of shofar is one of the greatest of the whole year, but you don't need it on Shabbos because Shabbos does it. The Rebbe says, there seems to me a much simpler way of answering the question. What's that? Tosfos is, there's Rashi and there's Tosfos on the page of the Talmud, of the Gemara. Tosfos states that the Torah grants the Jewish courts, in certain circumstances, where necessary, the Torah grants the Beis Din the power to uproot a mitzvah. So what's the problem? He says, why is the older Rebbe's asking this question about how are we going to manage with Rosh Hashanah without blowing the shofar, when it's not even really a question. What do you mean how? The Tosfos himself says so right there on the page, that the Beis Din was given by the Torah, was given the power to uproot the positive mitzvah. So what's really bothering them, that they're all in every generation asking this question? So he says what's really bothering them, the Rebbe explains, was something much deeper than whether the sages had the power to uproot something from the Torah or not. It's not just a legal issue over here. Apparently hidden between the lines lies a fundamental Hasidic or mystical concept. And that is what we need to figure out. There's something much deeper happening over here. One of the core principles of Judaism is that the Creator, Hashem, Kadosh Baruch Hu, God, fashioned this world with a purpose. Okay? It's a Gemara. We had it in Perek, in the Ethics of the Fathers, 2 weeks ago, at the end of chapter 6, if I remember correctly. Everything that Hashem created in this world has a purpose. Nothing is by mistake. Nothing is extra, right? Everything is there. How many of us can look around our house and say that every single detail in the house serves a purpose? You have stuff, on the sideboard. You have little tchotchkes. You know what tchotchkes are? That's the stuff you bought when you went on holiday to somewhere, and you bought a little tchotchke. You thought this was cute, and then you come home, you have no idea what to do with it. So it's sitting there on the side collecting dust. Yeah, tchotchkes, right? Can you say that it serves a purpose? Yeah, it's decorative and so on. But there are probably things that, every so often your wife goes through the house and cleans up and throws out what she considers to be useless. And you say, what do you mean useless? Of course, it's so important. She says, you haven't looked at it in 20 years, since we came back from the holiday in Tanzania. And you haven't looked at this thing. Yeah, but it's still, right? The mission is telling us Hashem created this whole universe. Nothing is without a purpose. Everything has a purpose. Dr. Orleans will tell me if I'm right, but I once read somewhere that they don't know what the appendix is for. It serves no purpose. It only causes problems to some people, and nobody knows what it's there for.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah.
Right? They want to say evolution. Someone says maybe that was the leftover for what used to be a tail. All nice stories, but that's theories. But practically, it serves no purpose in the human body. You can live very well without an appendix. The way David created the world is everything has a purpose. We may not know what the purpose is, but everything has a purpose. So how do we know what that purpose is of everything? Of course, through Hashem's Torah. The Torah prescribes detailed instructions, what we know as mitzvahs, which allow us to bridge the gap between the physical and the spiritual and draw holiness into the mundane. To give everything a purpose, a holy purpose. The Torah shows us how to bond with our Creator, purifying the world and making it His home. And that's the purpose of creation. So what's the purpose of the computer you're sitting in front of? You may use the computer for business, you may use the computer for leisure, but what was the purpose of why it was created? The purpose of why it was created, you are now doing right now. You're learning Torah, we're learning Torah together, and we are now fulfilling the purpose of the computer that we are now sitting in front of. That's its purpose. Everything else, it's by the by. In the words of the Medrash, that God created gold and silver for no other reason other than for the Beis Hamikdash, for the temple. Yet, that same gold and silver can be used for idols, for idol worship. It can be used for greed. It can be used for thievery and all sorts of crimes. But that's not what it was created for. When do you achieve the fulfillment of the purpose of gold and silver? When it's used to serve God in the Beis Hamikdash or in the shul, on top of a Sefer Torah, for tzedakah, gold and silver, not just the literal gold and silver, but money in general, when it's used, that is when it's achieving its purpose. So everything has a purpose. The Torah tells us how to use everything to fulfill its purpose. And we then take the whole world and, as we say here, purifying the world and making it His home, and that is the purpose of creation. We've discussed that many times. It's always good to remind ourselves. Every atom in this world was put here for us human beings to fulfill the mitzvahs. And there's not a single entity in the universe, from the largest star to the smallest particle, that can prevent us from fulfilling this goal. After all, why would an all-knowing, omnipotent creator put something obstructive or unnecessary, for that matter, in his creation? It's God. It's not you and me. So I give you the example of the appendix. The same question is asked with the planet, I think it's Saturn. And over there, it's Tutzach Dorten, it's Freilach. There's Hakofis going on there, 50,000 mile an hour winds are going on over there. Go figure out, why did Hashem do that? What's that all about? It has zero impact on us. Its scientists have discovered it, and it's windy, it's Freilach over there, it's all busy. Why is it so busy? But certainly one thing we know for sure, it's there, it's for a purpose. So there can't really be something which obstructs us from doing what we have to do, because the purpose of the world is for Torah and for mitzvahs. Do you remember the second Rashi of Chumash, anyone? Second Rashi of Chumash, he explains the word Bereshis. And he says, what is Bereshis? He says it's Beis Rashis. That the creation of the world was for the two, Beis is two, for the two firsts. Rashis is first. What are the two firsts? Yisrael and Torah. The whole creation of the world is that the Jew should be able to do a mitzvah and change the world in the positive sense. It should achieve its purpose. So nothing can really get in the way. It looks like it gets in the way. Sometimes it's perceived as getting in the way. Even a limited human being who fashions, say, a car, pays attention to every detail, installing every component deliberately, be it the gauges, the seat recliners, even the DVD player in the back. Every feature is there to enhance the driving experience. The gauges help the driver stay in control of the car, and the seat recliner lets him sit comfortably. The DVD player keeps his kids entertained so he can focus on the road. That's just a simple example of a car. They don't put things in a car which have no use, and that's human beings. In Detroit, Henry Ford, how much more so the Almighty. So the intention of the Creator is all that more planned out and deliberate. He arranges every molecule and event with utmost precision. And since he created everything, there's nothing in his world that does not lead to its ultimate purpose. And certainly nothing that may hinder this purpose from being reached. So everything has a purpose and everything can reach its purpose. Now, yes, sometimes we may not know how to achieve that purpose. So in that case, I got to keep away from it until I know how to use it properly to serve Hashem. That's the premise, the introduction to begin understanding the answer to our question here. With this premise, the question that the Alter Rebbe asked at the beginning takes on a whole new meaning. The Torah tasked the sages with the job of strengthening the positive commandments of the Torah and building protective borders around the negative ones, right? We discussed that many, many times. It's in the Chumash. Hashem says, "Vasitem mishmeret lemishmarti." You shall make guardrails for my guardrails. That tells the sages that they are allowed to decree certain things that they see that are making people are mistaken because of it. For example, I always tell you the same example. The prohibition is to pick a fruit from a tree on Shabbos. That's a biblical prohibition. And the sages came along and they said, you're not even allowed to smell a fruit from a tree on Shabbos. Why is that? Because when you smell a fruit from the tree, you may then come to pick the fruit from the tree. So better to make a fence around it, then you won't transgress the far worse biblical command. So they what am I up to here? They instituted things to strengthen the positive mitzvahs, and they can build protective borders around the negative ones. So on Shabbos, for instance, the sages instituted certain laws to prevent the Jew from carrying in a public domain or transgressing any one of the 39 forbidden types of work, like the example I just gave you of the fruit. Now, when the sages saw that the cycle of the calendar will from time to time cause Rosh Hashanah to coincide with Shabbos, they prohibited blowing the shofar on that day. Why? Because it may lead certain people to accidentally commit a forbidden act on Shabbos. Not everyone, but it may lead some. Then they made a rule for everyone. So here's the question now. But isn't that in contrast with the above mentioned axiom? How can it be that because of the calendar, we should have a problem with Shabbos? If everything is created to serve Hashem, everything is created with a purpose, so how can it be that the calendar causes us a problem with blowing shofar on Shabbos? How can it be? Who created the cycle of the moon and our cycle of the sun and the moon, etc.? Only God. So how can it be that God created a situation that you cannot that you made by mistake carry on Shabbos. It's impossible to imagine that anything, the lunar and solar cycles included, would be able to disrupt the proper performance of a mitzvah. How is it possible that the prohibition of carrying on Shabbos and the mitzvah of shofar conflict with each other, forcing the sages to uproot the mitzvah of shofar so that people won't carry on Shabbos, all because of a calendar? And who created the calendar? Not the calendar as we have hanging, but the idea of the time moving, that's Hashem. And if Hashem didn't create anything which is going to go against himself, so how can there be a problem over here between Shabbos and the shofar? That's really the big question over here. This then is what was bothering all of these rebbes. How can the sages accept that something in the order of the cosmos can force them to uproot a mitzvah from being performed in its appropriate time? How can God command us to blow the shofar every Rosh Hashanah, and then the same God creates a world in a way that will sometimes preclude the actual fulfillment of that command? That's really the question that's going on over here. And then comes the answer. The answer to this question is obvious. It's not a contradiction. Because even when shofar is not actually blown, its effect is still achieved. So there's no problem. The world is not a contradiction to the shofar, because the shofar is achieved on Shabbos because of that calendar, because it's Shabbos. By keeping Shabbos with all its restrictions, we accomplish whatever the shofar was to accomplish. If I keep Shabbos of Rosh Hashanah properly, then it's as if I blew shofar. The fact that the sages were concerned that an unlearned person may carry on Shabbos and therefore uproot the mitzvah, that only serves as evidence that the effect of the mitzvah of shofar will be achieved regardless. But if we keep Shabbos properly, then mission accomplished. And you're right. Your question is right. Nothing can be in the way of doing the mitzvah. God's nature cannot be in the way because everything that God has done is for the purpose of Torah and mitzvahs. Do we get that so far?
Yep.
Yeah? Okay.
Yep.
Let's move on. Yeah, we should stop and say L'chaim. That's right. Very good. Thank you, Ashley. We should stop and say L'chaim. Oh, time to get another bottle. You're not the only ones that I say L'chaim with on the internet, on Zoom. L'chaim, everyone.
Chaim.
L'chaim. Okay. So what are we saying here? Everything comes from God, and nothing, therefore, has no purpose. And everything, what's its purpose? Its purpose is to fulfill the mission. Therefore, our question was, on a deeper level, how can it be that a calendaric fluke, so to speak, that Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos, should be in the way of blowing the shofar on Shabbos? The answer is it's not a contradiction, because on Rosh Hashanah, you don't need it. That's why. The sages, you don't need it because it's Shabbos. The sages who knew about all of this, so they uprooted the mitzvah. That was the evidence to the fact of that what was already pre-existing, what we already know, and that is that Shabbos, if kept properly, is the equivalent of blowing the shofar on Shabbos. Of blowing the shofar. Okay. This gives us a newfound appreciation of mitzvahs, all mitzvahs, and their laws, including the mitzvahs derabanan, the mitzvahs that are instituted by the rabbis. One of the most painful things that I can hear when people say, because it's sadly out of ignorance, but people don't realize how foolish that they sound. It's only rabbinic. You know, if it's biblical, as if to say that if it's biblical, I do all the biblical ones. It's the rabbinic ones I don't do. You know, they don't do the rabbinical ones either. But it's a good excuse. It's only rabbinic. What does that mean? It's only custom. Sadly, that's not very intelligent. This is going to give us now a newfound appreciation of all mitzvahs and their halachas, including those instituted by the rabbis, even the rabbinic ones. The wide array of detailed laws that comprise the vast expanse of halachic literature are not a bunch of fragmented, unrelated directives. No, all of the details of different laws, 613 mitzvahs with thousands of laws of halachas in each one. They are not disparate, just separate things, unrelated. No, they reflect an all-encompassing underlying truth. The sages were able to perceive the inner dimension of the dynamics of Torah and creation, and it is on this truth that their rulings are based. For example, imagine a strip of islands grouped in close proximity to the ocean. Now, at first glance, it appears that as if these islands are diverse and disconnected. When looking below the surface, however, you'll discover that in reality, all these islands protrude from the same ocean bedrock, their separation merely a result of a superficial layer of water. They're all connected. Here, too, the sages were able to plumb deeper into the sea of the Torah, and their rulings were influenced by their understanding of the Torah's inner nature. And everything is in fact connected. That ends the explanation regarding Shofar. The same thing applies to Lulav. The reason they gave is simply you need to have a legal reason. But what's really underneath all this happening, that the Shabbos of Sukkot achieves what normally Lulav is able to achieve. The Shabbos of Rosh Hashanah achieves what Shofar is able to achieve. Because if it didn't, then we're missing something very important. The Torah tells us that there's something very important happening on these days. So how can we have it without those, without the paraphernalia, so to speak, that's necessary? And the answer is you don't need it because the day itself is what does it. In that case, you'll say, then what about Pesach? I mentioned earlier. Then how come did they allow us to eat matzah at the Seder? They should have said no matzah on the Seder on Pesach, the first night if it falls on Shabbos, because of the same problem. You may, yeah? And why don't we then say that Shabbos of Pesach does whatever matzah normally does? So that's what it says over here. The holiness of Pesach and its primary mitzvah, the eating of matzah. The sages found it appropriate to omit the physical acts of reading Megillah, of shaking lulav, even blowing the shofar when the respective holidays fall on Shabbos, because Shabbos fills in what is lacking. But they do not extend this restriction to Pesach. Indeed, commentators of later generations attempt to find an explanation for this. Why are the sages concerned that an unlearned person will carry his matzah to the rabbi's home to ask about its laws? Not everybody's familiar with the exact amount of what's to be eaten, at which point, and when it has to be eaten, how it has to be eaten. Lulav, for instance, seems to be less complicated than matzah, yet the sages forbade its performance when Sukkot occurs on Shabbos. However, based on this approach that we just said, everything falls into place. The fact that the sages did not extend their ruling to the matzah on Pesach tells us two things. First of all, it must be that matzah accomplishes something even the Shabbos cannot achieve. Yeah, the energy drawn on Shabbos is so great that it can fill a missing shofar. It can substitute for lulav or megillah. But when Pesach falls on Shabbos, Shabbos cannot fill in for the matzah. Something about the mitzvah of matzah is so sublime that the spiritual light it elicits is even greater than Shabbos. And that's why it doesn't apply to Shabbos. So here we have an interesting analysis that we've just done. You know, sometimes there's answers to a question on a halachic level, and sometimes there's answers to a question on a mystical level. The same question. And here you have a beautiful example of that. On a halachic level, we know why we don't blow shofar on Shabbos. On a halachic level, the reason they didn't extend this ban to Pesach is very simple. How many shofar? Anyone here have a shofar? How many do you have?
2.
Oh, you got 2. So if you have a shiloh in one, you always have the other one.
The boys, yeah.
Yeah. The commentators explain that matzah, everyone has much more than one matzah. So if someone has a shiloh with a matzah, he doesn't have to go to the Rav. He'll just put it to the side and take out another matzah. Usually, with the exception of present company, the person has, I also have 2. But usually people have one. If they have a shofar, it's usually 1. So he has a shofar and there's a problem, a shiloh, he'll go and ask the Rav. Same thing with Arba Minim. People usually have 1. And the Megillah, if they have, they'll have 1. So that's on the legal level, that's the simple answer to the question, which we could have saved 45 minutes. But we are explaining it on an esoteric level. And that opens up to us a whole new world. And that new world gives us an appreciation of mitzvahs in general. That mitzvahs, as I said, mitzvahs is a command, that's the basic level. Mitzvah is a connection, that's according to the Zohar. And then that mitzvahs is a unique energy, unique radiation, and unique light And it brings down into the world every time we perform a mitzvah, every time you and I perform a mitzvah, whatever it may be, whether or not we consider it important or not, whether or not we appreciate its significance or not. It's irrelevant. It's bringing down a tremendous light. And then, when we're talking about that, this mitzvah of shofar is unique. This is a light that affects the entire year to come. And when Shabbos falls on Rosh Hashanah together, this is not just any Shabbos. This is a very, very special Shabbos. And when I keep that Shabbos properly, I am then able to elicit that energy, which is normally achieved through blowing the shofar, by keeping that Shabbos. Pesach, at this level, is even greater. The matzah somehow of Pesach is even greater than a Shabbos. So therefore, even when Shabbos falls on Pesach falls on Shabbos, they didn't cancel it. They kept the mitzvah of matzah. So you see here a very clear illustration of how the revealed part of the Torah and the hidden part of the Torah work together in harmony. And there's that level, and then dig deeper and you'll find another level, and they all work out together very well. Any questions?
Sages, was there a sort of time limit on when sages could alter or make rabbinic law, or could we have a sage in our times that could say, well, this is different and I'm now altering the law?
The same way it worked then, it can work today. The question is whether logistically it can work today. What do I mean? How did it work then? The sages, whether they be the sages in Babylon or the sages in the land of Israel, those are the two centers where the Jewish people lived at the time towards the end of the Second Temple and afterwards, right? They saw a problem. Whatever it is, they got to make a fence, right? They saw, like the example I gave you, they saw the problem of people were smelling fruit. And as a result of that, right, people didn't have books like we have today. They weren't as aware necessarily as we might be today. And they saw that this is becoming neglected. People were smelling fruit, and while they're smelling a fruit, let's smell. Oh, this is Gishmak, I'll have this one. And they pick it on Shabbos. So it must have been somebody who came up with this thought, maybe we should ban smelling the fruit. So he would have suggested it to the other sages, or he would have proclaimed this in his town if he was in charge. And then it spread, and then everybody accepted it. Once everybody accepted it, then it's what we know as what we have handed down till this day as a fence. I don't like using the word of prohibition. It's a rabbinic fence. It's there a fence sounds more justified, because a fence is to stop you from falling into the pit and harm yourself. So the fence is there to protect me from falling into the larger prohibition, which is the biblical prohibition with all its punishments that have to come from it. Now, in theory, that can be today as well, right? And that does happen today, but in microcosm, it can happen in small communities. It doesn't usually happen that all rabbis of the whole world will agree. And more than that, that's a joke. More than that, we don't like to make new decrees and to restrain people, unless it's something which is absolutely necessary. So, for example, at the beginning of this COVID in March and April and May, most communities forbade making garden minyanim. Most rabbanim, okay? Then they allowed it when things started calming down a bit. But at the very beginning, when nobody knew what this is all about, I'm talking here from 20th of March and onwards approximately, when people started being rushed to the hospital all over the place. And the Jewish community was hit more than others because we have shuls and we spend time together more than others, weddings and so on. So they realized, and no one knew what it is. Not the medical, not the government, no one knew. So no one knew if standing outside, if looking at someone, you can get it. No one knows nothing. So they banned, there's also a thing, they banned, can't even have minyanim. So the din is, if the local Rav, the one who's called the Morad Asana, the rabbi of that community, he said that you're not allowed to have it. That means Torah says you're not allowed to have a minyan. Davening with a minyan, you're going against the Torah. You're going against God, so to speak. And many people struggled with that. That's when you're able to separate those who serve God and those who serve habit. Mm-hmm. I haven't not davened with a minyan for 50 years. I haven't broken this habit. Yeah, but the Torah now says you're not allowed to daven with a minyan. Don't tell me what the Torah says. It's about me. It's not about the Torah. He didn't say it in those words. But that's by their actions what people were doing. The Rav said, or the Rabbanim said, you're not allowed to daven with a garden minion. You can't tear yourself away because you have been davening for 50 years. You don't want to break your, baseball, the hitting streak. You must have something similar to that in football. He gotta, you have a streak. You don't want to break it. Here's a situation where the Torah said you're not supposed to daven with a minion. You understand? So that's an example of something that recently happened. Yeah, and Rabbanim ruled that. Obviously, as soon as things became better and they became more aware and so on, so they allowed. Before opening the shuls, they said, fine, you can have garden minyanim as long as there's a social distance and you wear whatever it may be, whatever, right, and so on. So that's already each community today. Each community rabbi will tell them what and how. That's just with that example. So back in the olden days when it was mainly two large communities, Babylon and Israel, it was much easier when it was necessary to come to a consensus. There are some communities today that forbid the internet. You must have heard about it, right? They forbid the internet. Okay, I may not agree with it, but I'm not part of that community, so it's not for me to comment, right? I disagree with it ideologically. I think it's wrong. Okay, from the teachings of Hasidus, the teachings of the Rebbe, that, and especially what we just learned here, that everything Hashem created in His world is there for a purpose and a positive and a holy purpose, then so too it is with internet technology. The fact that some people can use internet technology for corruption and for immorality doesn't take away the fact that Hashem created it. And it's our mission to reveal its purpose. Okay, someone who didn't learn that, it doesn't know that, so they're very frightened of the internet, rightly so. But to ban it, but it's irrelevant if I agree or not. I'm not part of that community. So there are some communities that have banned it, okay? The point is that you and I have to look at things and try and figure out, is this right or wrong? Can this be redeemed, so to speak? Can I reveal the purpose, the godly purpose in this thing? Or is it just here am I just using it for the fun of it? Nothing wrong with playing golf, but is there a way that I can reveal the godliness in it? I'm sure there are. I know that there are some who go on golf. They do they stop for a l'chaim and I don't think they do a l'chaim. It wouldn't work with golf. They stop for a shir, the 9th hole or something like that. Halfway through. Gimmicks, this type of thing, or golf courses for charity fundraisers for tzedakah. So it's taking something which is, so to speak, spiritually parv. It's not forbidden, but it's not holy, and then using it for a holy purpose. That's fine. That's our mission, to find and reveal the goodness that there is, that Hashem has put in everything. And as the world develops and reveals more and more of God's fascinating creation, it gives us a greater challenge to discover even more so the greatness of Hashem. We had a few months ago, we had a video of Professor Green, Velvel Green. He worked for NASA from Minnesota. So he said, it wasn't on that video, a different time. He said that he was, maybe it was on that one. He said that they were doing research in the 70s to go to Mars. Now they already have the Mars, what's it called, the thing that's there. But they were then considering it, and he didn't know if this is allowed, according, to search for life on Mars and to see what's doing this. So he asked the Rebbe. There was a definitely search. Keep searching. It'll only enhance our appreciation of the wonderful work of Hashem. So that when we daven and we say Psuki de Zimra in the morning, we read the Tehillim before Baruch Hu, in that first part of davening, describing the wonderful creations of Hashem. The more we discover, the more wondrous His creations become. It only enhances our appreciation of Him. Science shouldn't be a contradiction. On the contrary, it's meant to be there to support our awareness of God. And look what else He did. It's an ever-expanding universe and black holes and like I said, 50,000 mile an hour winds going on in planet Saturn, I think it is. Stan, am I correct? Planet Saturn?
Yeah.
Yep, I got it right. Very good. Right? So back to your original question. Yes. So in theory, it could be done. It is sometimes done, but usually in small pockets. Not something overall for everyone. Unless it's something really, really big, which hasn't happened in I don't know how long.
I think the prohibition of internet minions where you could say Kaddish, I guess, is an example.
You mean online?
Online, yeah. They say you can't say Kaddish online.
That's not a rabbinic decree. That's because the criteria for a minion requires 10 physical human beings, not pictures of them
Okay.
or electronic images of them, which isn't them.
Mm.
You know, for that matter, you can have 9 cartoons, and then the 10th with yarmulkes, and then the 10th one can watch it and say Kaddish, because there are 9 cartoons with yarmulke on them. But I'm not looking at you. I'm looking at an image of you, an electronic reproduction of you. It's not you.
Mm.
So, and for a minyan, you need 10 physical, breathing human beings. That's why I never understood the whole issue with it. You know, it's very, how simple do people want to make it? You know, you're not that, you're intelligent. How can you ask such a question?
Is there a halacha of people on balconies making a minyan in a street if they're all standing on a balcony? Is there a halacha about the distance between people?
I think we had it in Mishnah Torah a few weeks ago. Even it's in the right. It's not a new phenomena. It just was expressed in different ways. Regarding benching, we have the rules. The Mishnah speaks about the 2 people. If you have a group of people in one room, a group of people in another room, can they join together to bench with a minyan? If they can see each other, definitely. If only the end of the tables can see each other, is a machlekes. If they can't see each other but only hear each other, definitely not. Right? And then we discuss also regarding porches and things like that. If there's a garden with a fence, if the fence is tall enough to be a valid mechitza, then they can't join for a minyan, even though they can hear each other. Right? Very practical if you live in a community where people have adjoining gardens with fences in the middle. Yes, all of that is discussed. And then we just apply it to how it works today. The porch is still a porch the way it used to be. If you can see each other and hear each other and so on. Yeah. The video is a very nice video, but for some reason, I don't know what's changed this week. And when I tested it, it didn't work on the share screen. So I'll try it now. And if it doesn't work, then I'll have to get some tech support to figure it out. So let me share the screen. And let's see if this goes. Where did it go? Hold on. Oh, I have to put it onto the screen first. Where is it? Oh, here it is. No. Okay, let me get it over here. Sorry about this. What's this? No. Oh, here it is. Okay. Share. Ah. Okay. Do you see anything?
No.
It's
You got
black.
a black screen.
Black, yeah.
You don't see anything now. You see anything?
Just the words.
Hear it.
Just the words. No. Okay.
Just
I'll
the
have to find
subtitles.
solution and show it to you another week. I'm sorry. I don't know what the is.
Do we need the video? Can we just not? Is it the Rebbe talking?
It's they're talking in some interviews. Yeah, okay. You can see.